Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 12 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I got a full house today, and I'm excited about it. Of course, I got Chris Feeney, the channel sales engineer with me, who's with me every week, calling the co-host. Chris, how's it going?
It is going well. Very excited about today's topic. And to the two guests that we've got with us, IGEL Awesomeness is about to descend upon this podcast.
Well, and that's interesting because you and I jumped on early and we were the first two here, and you and I were going to have to cover this topic, which I think we could have done a fine job of. But then we brought in the big guns. We got with us Jeff Kalberg, who I've known forever. There's a funny Jeff and Jeff story that maybe someday I'll tell. But Jeff Kalberg, what's your current title over there at IGEL?
And right on cue, he dropped off. So he's going to join back in.
So let's scoot over to Fredrik. Fredrik Brattstig is with IGEL as well. Fredrik, you're over in Germany, right?
I'm actually based in Sweden.
Sweden, I'm sorry. Does that? I'm sure people.
Same time zone, but different language.
So, Fredrik, what's your role over at IGEL?
So I am a tech evangelist for IGEL, covering the European area theater. And so my counterpart is Jeff for the US theater. So
okay.
And Jeff is back.
And Jeff is back. Jeff, we had just introduced you, and you vanished into virtual thin air.
I never went away. I just turned off my video.
Yeah.
So you guys are sounding a little broken up to me. I don't know how I'm sounding to you, but
yeah, you're sounding broken up.
Okay.
So
go ahead and keep talking. I'll drop out and come back in.
Okay, sorry about that. Hey, Fredrik, let's work with you here, and we'll interview, and hopefully Jeff can jump back in, maybe by audio, maybe by phone or something along the way. But Fredrik, you've got the blog up in front of you. I think you are one of, if not the author of the blog, right?
Yeah, it's actually based on. I have my own personal blog about IGEL mainly, and accelerated graphics and other cool stuff from IGEL. You can find that blog on virtualbrat.com. It was picked up to be posted on the IGEL corporate webpage. So yeah, it's a blog about the new features of Windows Virtual Desktop in IGEL OS 11.05.100, which was released in late February.
Well, let me give the title of the blog just so people could Google it or search it however they want to and find it. It's called IGEL Releases 11.05.100. Check out the new features here, WVD Part 1. So now you're committed to doing a Part 2 blog with a podcast with us later when the Part 2 comes.
Apparently. Happily enough, the blog is already out there, but the podcast, of course, we can do a follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, why don't you give us a little insight into your the intro here, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, okay. So, as said, late February, IGEL released a new firmware, which included quite a few more new features of Windows Virtual Desktop and the IGEL OS integration. So, the blog is as said, split in two sections, mainly because of I do not like to do blog posts that are too long, and I wanted to cover the different steps in a more detail, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So the first piece of the blog is that we have modernized the login experience, the user interface for accessing your Windows Virtual Desktop environment. And the second piece is Ezeep cloud printing by ThinPrint integrations. And both of those are definitely very useful. There has been a lot of questions about modernizing the login mask and customizing the login mask for corporates so that they have the possibility to add their own background images and whatever it might be for the login experience.
Okay. So something really more on the aesthetic side.
Yeah, certainly. But also making it easier because we have the possibility now to pre-specify the logon domain. So previously, when you logged on to Windows Virtual Desktop using IGEL OS, you had to type in your complete username, so your email address, so to speak, Fred@virtualbrat.com. Now I can pre-specify at virtualbrat.com, which allows my users to only type the login name instead of the complete email address, or which is good. And you can customize the background image. You can customize, remove the IGEL logo if you want to. There is placed in center bottom of the screen. You can replace that one with your own company logo if you want to. And yeah, just making it more user-friendly, so to speak.
So guys, maybe we should do this. There's probably a lot of our listeners that come from the Citrix world or the VM world. WVD, just in general, are you guys seeing a massive uptick in your customers that are at least kicking the tires with it as it relates to IGEL?
I can start by saying that there is a lot of buzz around it. We have certainly come across new customers that were not on our map since before, by being in the Windows Virtual Desktop space. There is definitely talks about customers switching from Citrix or VMware to a complete VVD environment. But I think it's also a new service, a relatively new service. So let's see where it goes.
I have a question for you guys. Kalberg, are you back? And you sound like Max Headroom now, or no?
I'm back.
Oh, you sound beautiful. So, you don't look
yeah.
beautiful.
We'll go back to the old technology.
Yeah. Hey,
the
let me ask you,
smartphone.
this question came up this morning from a new client of ours that's looking to go big in the virtual desktop world, and they're just starting to touch WVD a little bit. The VDA license, the virtual desktop access license from Microsoft, is that the same if you're using WVD as it is with Citrix? Is it still required to access that Windows 10, or does Microsoft have a magic wand where they say, okay, you don't need that in my world?
Well, when we talk about VDA, I mean, you're talking about, well, let's just talk about what's required to access Windows Virtual Desktop at all, right? And you have to have the appropriate Microsoft license. You know, once you have the appropriate Microsoft license, you're allowed to connect to Windows Virtual Desktop, but you have to pay for Azure usage. So if the question is, what do you need legally, from a licensing perspective, as long as you have one of the qualifying Microsoft licenses, you're allowed to connect to Windows Virtual Desktop.
Yeah.
But Windows Virtual Desktop is also kind of defined as being, Microsoft offered service running on Azure, where Microsoft is actually providing and maintaining and managing the Windows desktop operating system and using Windows 10 multi-session on the back end. When you look at Citrix, okay, what Citrix offers, Citrix also offers Windows Virtual Desktop, if you will, but Citrix doesn't call it that. It's Windows 10 multi-session on the back end with the Citrix VDA installed on the front end. So when it comes to Windows Virtual Desktop itself, there is no VDA per se that you install. Fredrik, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. And it's just like the service includes it.
Well, let me make sure, guys, let me make sure I clarify my acronyms here. So in our world, there's two VDAs. There's Virtual Desktop Agent from Citrix, and there's Virtual Desktop Access Licensing from Microsoft. Jeff, I'm specifically talking about the Virtual Desktop Access License. If you check the chat window, I put something in there. But the little catch-all Microsoft license that you need to be able to connect into a virtual Windows 10 session.
Yeah, so I'm reading through that, and what caught my eye is that was, going back 10 years, there was a reference to as of July 1st, 2010, for example. That honestly, that license requirement, that VDA license, if you were coming to a Microsoft VM environment from a thin client, non-Windows machine, then you would be paying for that. And honestly, we called that the VDA tax, and a lot of people did. And early years from my time at Imprivata in healthcare, that was a blocker. People just said, nope, we're not. And it kind of halted the expansion of thin clients. I recall that there was a change there in the world of Microsoft in the last 5 years where they kind of maybe modified what that licensing was. I'm not a Johnny Rocket guru on that right now, but it sort of lifted, I think, that concept, if I'm not mistaken, and sort of freed open the idea that you could come in to that environment and not have to pay that tax. To confirm that for sure, but that's at least from what I'm reading there. That's what I'm seeing.
So guys, let me try to clarify a couple things real quick here. So what it used to be is you had to have Windows and it had to be covered on the endpoint. And it had to be covered under a software assurance agreement. Now it can be anything covered under a software assurance agreement. But Chris, I doubt very seriously Microsoft has given up that tax, right? That's the only way they're going to make money in this thing. But if you guys know differently, that would be great. But Microsoft's not big about giving away stuff. Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, yeah. Okay. So coming back around here, you have to have, in order to use Windows Virtual Desktop, okay, you have to have one of the qualifying licenses in place, okay? And that's a Microsoft 365, an E3 or an E5, okay? If it's or an A3 and an A5 or the student use benefit, okay? You can also subscribe to Microsoft 365, which is the whole Windows Desktop and Office 365 kind of, and Microsoft Windows licensing all rolled into one as a service for Microsoft, and you get an F3 or Business Premium in that. And then you can also have a Windows 10 Enterprise. Okay, this is where we're going to see a lot of people. Windows 10 Enterprise E3 or an E5 license, or an A3 or an A5 license. Okay, these are all, if you have any of those licenses, you are entitled to run Windows Virtual Desktop without paying any more money, other than Azure usage.
Yeah.
Okay, and then of course there's the Windows 10 VDA. Okay, which this is per user price. If you don't have a Windows 10 Enterprise E3 or an E5, you can just go buy a VDA license.
So Jeff, so your M365 license supersedes the need for a VDA license, is what you're saying?
Correct.
That makes sense.
And just for your reference here in the future, I'm posting a link back in the chat, okay, to the US pricing details where they talk about, there's multiple places where you can find this on Microsoft sites. But
so guys, the answer to my question then is, if you've got that M365 license, then the VDA conversation goes away. If you don't, then we need to have that conversation.
Correct.
Gotcha. So Chris is kind of right, and Jeff kind of helped explain it. And now we're back onto the topic of IGEL and WVD. Sorry for that little aside, but I know it just came up this morning where I didn't know the latest on how to answer. So that helps me a ton. Hopefully helps the listeners. So Fredrik, well, let's go bullet by bullet here. The first one is perspective, pre-specified login domain. You already covered that, right? That's where you don't have to type in the full user, the complete UPN, right? The user principal.
Yeah, exactly. So it allows you to control how much the user needs to provide to actually be able to log in.
Yeah. And then the next one talks about custom wallpapers. I guess maybe that was missing, or it's been expanded upon.
Yeah, it has been a fixed background image provided by IGEL. There has been a lot of asks from customers and prospects about to set their own image.
And then the next is the WVD client company logo, a similar type thing, but getting your company brand on there.
Yeah, exactly. So replace the IGEL logo with your own logo, if you want to.
And I worked with a guy who taught me very long ago that you can tell the company employees that the desktop, that computer is theirs. I mean, yours, the company's. But if you just put your company logo on the background, that's such a psychological thing. It says, this isn't your personal computer. Don't put your personal stuff on it. See, the company owns it. See the background? The company owns this. You don't own this. It's such a psychological thing. And that sounds like a great example. And then finally, WVD client, no background and no logo. I guess that's just the other two, just completely blank then.
Yeah, so it's the possibility to make it raw, so to speak. I would recommend nobody to use the no background. They should rather go for either a background image or a custom color scheme, because it's just very gray if you deselect enable the no background. But the no logo can be good because then you can have your own wallpaper, so to speak, or background image, and put the logo somewhere else than the pre-specified location.
Yeah,
So
I was going to say what's also nice here is you can mention the color branding, right? You often have official company colors in with their static color formats, and so that's also an option here, as you point out.
Yeah.
It was always one of the. Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead. I was just gonna say it's always been important for corporates to be able to maintain their corporate images, and the ability to take the base IGEL. There's been a lot of branding and the ability to replace wallpapers and to do different things around screensavers and advertising and other things. There's been a lot of functionality there, but when it came to logging into the login screen for the Windows Virtual Desktop, as Fredrik said, we had locked that in. But now it's all fully configurable, and you can do so much, as you say, Chris. You can control you can really focus on corporate colors, corporate emblems and logos, and corporate background and standardization, and you can control all that from the UMS, like you can control everything on an IGEL endpoint. So it's really good stuff. The other things we did, I don't know if you mentioned it, is we've changed the interface a little bit. In the past, when you logged into Windows Virtual Desktop, you had all of the desktops and applications enumerated back to you, and a screen that was kind of moved left and right, and people think up and down, I think, these days. And so we rearranged the interface, not just the background and the colors, but also the behavior of the screens when you zoom in and zoom out and scroll up and scroll down inside the actual, once you've logged into Windows Virtual Desktop.
And Jeff, that's good. I was going to come back to you and ask a question. You've been around this space a long time. I'm sure Fredrik has. I know Chris has. It's not always about the best tech. It's about really good tech that makes for happy users. And a lot of that's just aesthetics, right? The way they look, the way they think, the way it looks, and how pretty it is. The user happiness is a big portion of what we as EUC IT folks have to spend our time working on, which is why you guys are doing this.
Certainly. Adding another small hint, because a wallpaper, so to speak, or background image might seem like a very easy task, but it's also a very powerful thing to have, because you have the control of the background image of the Windows Virtual Desktop login mask, which means that you can provide an image containing whatever information you want to your users. Of course, it cannot be interactive, but you can type like somewhere on the image, you can have the phone number to the service desk, for instance, just giving some power of communicating, so to speak, with your users.
Yeah. Hey guys, before we move on to the topic of printing, anything else around the user experience that either in this release or previous releases that you guys want to highlight?
Nothing spectacular from my side.
And so, Jeff, this release, and Fredrik both, this release seems to be really all about WVD, and that's kind of common in IGEL world, right? We work on one client one time, and the next time we might work on a different client, and we just keep evolving the story from release to release. Is that a fair way to assess it, or is it just happened to work out this way this time?
I think it just happened to work out this way. We don't, let's not forget. We continue to. WVD is hugely important, but we also have our other partners in Citrix and VMware and AWS and Amazon, and we've made lots of advances. There's lots of advances going on with those clients as well, but you're seeing a lot of concurrent advances because we're moving at such a faster pace now.
Yeah,
there's good stuff going on in lots of places.
Yeah, this topic of the blog doesn't cover everything that's in 11.05, but as Jeff alluded to, there's a lot more there. And even since 11.5.100 came out, we've added some new updates since then. Case in point, our relationship with Citrix, for example, is now at a place where we have day one support for their their Linux updated clients. And so we'll get that and have it ready very quickly, along with any kind of new feature sets. And so the other big piece is that the kernel and base system were updated, which gives us more hardware support, which kind of ties into the IGEL Ready program with vendors like Lenovo and others, where they have these newer hardware devices with which would need that advanced support. So all of that is kind of heading in the direction we want. But obviously, this has been probably the biggest uplift for the WVD client that I've seen, apart from some of the things behind the scenes. But this user experience one is obviously key.
Chris, that's a good point, right? It's not only about the WVD client and what you're using now and exposing it. It's about the kernel itself and what that brings to the spectrum of hardware and other things that might need to be, fixed or secured or enabled.
Yeah. Some of the vendors that are in that Ready program, they've got some awesome technology, right? And often it's, I would say, state of the art, right? And so you have to make sure that we can work with those features, and that's where the kernel updates are coming, and obviously a quality process to try to make sure that when a customer does buy and they get that device and it comes with IGEL shipped on it, that it's got a version that has been tested and they know it's going to work. And then obviously from there, throw in the features that they want, whether it's WVDThis or Citrix that or VMware, whatever it might be. So,
well, another thing is this whole march to IGEL being a software company. We are looking at supporting the broader base of hardware, and the hardware from companies like Lenovo and LG and others is continuing to advance with newer technologies. I think about Wi-Fi 6. That's a new shift now in the wireless technology, right? And the wireless LAN technology, and so here we have to, in order to be able to use that, we have to update. We have to have newer kernels. Some of the other.
That's a good topic for me. So I was going to come back to this one and another one, but laptops, right? I mean, the more progressive your Linux kernel is, the more likely all this crazy laptop peripheral support and laptop hardware support is going to be likely to work, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think that's the greatest point. I mean, I ran into that when I came to IGEL initially going into Fed. There was, great opportunity to repurpose a lot of old hardware, laptops that were running Windows and they were going to a virtual desktop at the end of the day, but, supporting them. And then you kind of get through, okay, we can convert it, but then some of the other things that you might expect, closing the lid, undocking the workstation, switching automatically from, wired to wireless and back and forth seamlessly. And we ran into some hiccups there initially in the first year or two. We got through a lot of that now. It's almost it's very seamless at this point with the right settings and configurations. But the fact that the kernel update is now getting more, I would say in the last Fred, Jeff, I'm thinking in the last 6 months we've had more kernel updates than I can remember than maybe in the last first couple of years. Is that accurate?
Well, no, we've always had updated kernels over the years. I've been around this 20 years and we've always updated it. It's often not seen. So we'll do minor kernel upgrades, but you've seen a lot of them recently through the private builds at 11.04.100 as we've moved to 11.05.100.
Yeah, that's kind of what I think direct result of some of these newer hardwares and stuff.
But we're also going to see, we're going to go ahead, but we also, it used to be, a lot of people will say, oh, well, we're running Ubuntu. And as you guys know, it's always been a thorn in my side when somebody says that, because we're not an Ubuntu distribution. We don't use Ubuntu package management. We don't use the Ubuntu kernel anymore. There was an alignment, if you will. I might look at Ubuntu as a build environment, as a platform to build on, simply because the network stack and the X server and a bunch of other components that make up an operating system. We don't necessarily need to maintain those because we need to focus on the features that people need to use, like WVD and Citrix. But we moved away from and going to the mainline kernel. We're pulling stuff from Debian. We pull stuff from actual source. We do use some components, some applications and such from Ubuntu to build IGEL OS. But by going directly to the kernel sources now, we keep that updated and keep that current. We keep the wireless stack current. We keep the wireless firmwares current, all lending itself towards being able to support the newest hardware that's out there. And that's a good thing.
Hey guys, before we move on to the next topic of printing, I do have one more question for Fredrik and Jeff. The things that we've changed about the user experience as it relates to WVD and this particular version, are those things that we're taking advantage of the WVD client that's within IGEL, or are these things IGEL had to do above and beyond what Microsoft is making available in the client?
So it's above and beyond. So the login mask has always been IGEL's piece, so to speak, on top of the provided code by Microsoft. So this is something that the IGEL dev team has put together.
And that's really important to highlight that Microsoft's doing a lot of great things to maybe close the gap between themselves and others. But it's companies like IGEL that are continuing to understand what the users may need that they're not getting from Microsoft. And that's, it's a big kudos to IGEL.
We go back and I always like to point out, I mean, Microsoft has been developing the RD core for Linux, which is behind the technology behind our WVD client. And we've been working with them, providing feedback and advice and working together to develop this. And one of the pieces that was quietly done, fourth quarter last year was the release of the virtual channels and the support for dynamic virtual channels, which has opened up opportunities for Zoom and Fabulatech and a lot of other companies out there, because dynamic virtual channels is a huge part of the end user experience. But without it, a lot couldn't be done. So as we move on and talk about printing and unified communications and access to USB devices, all of that hinges on this idea of a virtual channel.
Yeah, we just did a Citrix podcast yesterday. We talked a lot about the HDX protocol and virtual channels, and certainly a lot of concepts are flowing from one company to the other, and it's going to be interesting to watch Microsoft try to catch up with some of the other players there. I hope they have enough money that they can afford to invest in that. All right, let's talk about printing. So the guys from ThinPrint showed up on my radar yesterday for the first time in forever. Haven't heard from them in forever. And all of a sudden they're talking to us again. It must be because they're interested in what we're going to talk about next, which is the ThinPrint integration with work from home, work from anywhere, BYOD, and IGEL. Fredrik, you want to introduce us into that topic?
Yeah, of course. I mean, the Ezeep integration allows you to do BYOP, so bring your own printer, which has always been a hassle since day one of the Windows Virtual Desktop Client for IGEL, to support adding your locally attached or network attached printers, of course, also to your current endpoint and provide that printer to the session. But that is now a possibility with the Ezeep Cloud Print, and it's amazingly easy. So add your printer, enable Ezeep, and connect to Windows Virtual Desktop, and you're good. Of course, you need to have the Ezeep Blue subscription and so on, but that's a base requirement for the whole setup. It was possible definitely to print previously. I mean, either like on the connection between your on-prem network and the Azure network. If you had a VPN, then you could, of course, utilize your Office printers through the VPN line from your Windows Virtual Desktop environment. But it has been a challenge to do like home office use when maybe you do not want to have VPN connections from every home office user to Azure, for instance. On the virtualbrats.com blog a year ago, I think, I posted a blog on how to do a workaround of printing. Me and Jeff figure out how to if you actually printed a PDF file in a specific folder, we could have the IGEL device to print this using the block storage mapping in Windows Virtual Desktop. But now this is history. I think the Ezeep Cloud Print is a very good solution for enabling printing for any user.
Yeah. Jeff, any more insight to add to that? That's certainly a conversation for people who still print, which at some point during the week or during the month, we all still print. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, we don't do a lot of printing these days. At least I don't. But when I do need to print, it's nice to have a solution. I mean, they've done a ThinPrint's pretty interesting. I mean, they've taken everything they know about printing, which they've been in the industry for years and years and years. And they basically adapted it to a cloud world, and they've done a very elegant job. As Fredrik said, I mean, we get the subscription, the Ezeep subscription, and you hook it into your Azure AD tenant, and then you basically log in, and your printers just appear. It's as seamless and easy as you could possibly imagine. And then behind the scenes, ThinPrint has a ton of other features, that can help control the printing and the direction of the printing. So it's very good stuff.
Now, Jeff, is that's the control of home-based printers and corporate, I'm sure, and universal print driver interjection as well? How's that work?
Yeah, ThinPrint, they use their own print driver. So anything that's coming off of the Windows Virtual Desktop environment to a ThinPrint connected printer, which could be those connected to your IGEL device. It could be your network printers. They're all accessible through the whole ThinPrint cloud-based print server, but they're all using a ThinPrint driver. This is similar to a PostScript or PDF driver.
Yeah.
It won't control the big, complicated, 10-drawer, 3-sided printers that are out there. That you still have to do that the old way.
Yeah. And kudos again to IGEL for being willing to work with several key players. And it may be a situation where you need several different printing technologies to interact with your IGEL environment in order to, different use cases. Maybe BYOP is one, and hundreds of potential company network printers might be the other.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the first solution for real printing in Windows Virtual Desktop on IGEL OS, and I mean, potentially we will see other technologies emerging quite soon.
We, case in point, still missing from this whole equation was the fact that what is Microsoft's printing solution? And Microsoft has been working on Universal Print, which is their cloud-based solution. It'll be subscription-based as well. And Microsoft, we know that we've been waiting for printing support in RD Core, and that's coming very soon. And then, we'll be able to work on something around a Microsoft printing solution, it will be another one that'll be out there, probably something towards fourth quarter.
Right. And that's part of the world of Microsoft we've all lived in for a while, is they make good stuff, but they need third parties to continue to expand, because my joke about having plenty of money is true, but they don't have more time than any of us. So it takes third parties like IGEL and ThinPrint and others to make the solutions work the way our users need them to work, right?
Correct. They just have a few other projects that they work on from time to time.
Yeah.
So it's not...
Well, we can all thank Microsoft for giving us jobs, right, in the last 25 years.
I thought that was Apple.
Maybe Apple too, sure.
So, Chris, I think about that all the time. And you know why I'm a Microsoft guy? The reason I'm a Microsoft guy, it was so easy to steal Windows NT 4 and put it on hardware and test and play with it.
I had some old hardware I repurposed for trying to pass some of my early years of MCPs or whatever. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was talking to a 22-year-old kid yesterday, called me up, wanted a job, and I'm like, tell me about the internet, tell me about networking. He didn't know a whole lot of anything about this stuff. And, you know, in today's world where you could do it all in a virtual environment, I guess there's a little bit of abstraction from the physical layer that would confuse you. But at the same time, I remember spending hours and hours and hours installing NT4 just so I could do two things and break it, just to do it all over again.
I mean, also based on history, and I'm not saying that it's impossible to find new people coming into the IT area, but it's really like
You see that?
with all the Microsoft Windows anti-workstation diskette, perfect. So the kids today do not really know what a diskette is. So I mean, finding talent today in terms of IT is, I think it's getting harder and harder because it's so easy to start consuming. It's very different to start to understand what lies behind. I mean, you need to have all the networking, you have to have all the memory addressing knowledge to actually be able to do this in a bigger scale.
Right.
So it will be interesting to see where it goes.
Boy, that is a philosophical door opener there. It's so true. There is so much technology. I think about my grandkids, you know, and calculators, and the ability to just ask Alexa, you know, what's 2 + 2, and have Alexa tell you. But you do, when it comes to IT, you have all of that background, that knowledge, that infrastructure. You have to be trained in that. It's challenging because you have to learn the basics.
So let me do this for everybody listening. I did this yesterday, probably twice. If you just Google CompTIA A+ and go to videos, there's a 4-hour, almost 5-hour video on YouTube that takes you through the entire A+ basic class, where you learn about token ring and you know, coax cables and Ethernet and TCP/IP and UDP. You're listening to this and you don't know what I just said, or if I ask you the question, I do it all the time, what is the internet? And you have no idea. Go watch that video, 5 hours. It'll jumpstart you ahead of all your competition, I promise. Well, Jeff, I promised you and Fredrik this would only last 30 minutes, and we're 50 minutes into it. Let's start with Fredrik. Fredrik, anything else that you would want listeners of this specific podcast to know?
Stay tuned for part 2.
Okay.
That's basically it. I mean, this is implemented stuff. It's very easy to configure, as always with IGEL. Just start using the services and listen out to part 2 when it comes available.
Sure. So, Jeff, you were probably missing in action for that moment, maybe, or maybe you could hear us. But because you and Fredrik did part 1, now you're on the hook for part 2.
Well, be happy to be part of part 2, part 3. There's a lot going on. There's a lot coming down the pike. So, you know, we didn't get a chance to talk about everything in the blog. We didn't talk about Zoom, the incredible work Zoom has been doing. We didn't talk about Teams. That'll be a topic. I think maybe in part 2 we could chat a little bit about that. Just constantly, as the ecosystem builds more and more, we're getting more and more features into Windows Virtual Desktop that are sorely needed that make it a viable option.
Yeah, let's not forget Fabulatech either. There's a good section there that solves a lot of problems that we can get into on the next blog.
Guys, help me out. Help me out. Leave a Dukes of Hazzard cliffhanger, right? The car's coming off the cliff and people coming back for next time.
I certainly appreciate that reference. Friday nights from years ago. Definitely some cliffhangers. We'll leave them wanting more, right?
Let's try that on Fredrik. Fredrik, does a Dukes of Hazzard cliffhanger between before and after commercial, does that mean anything at all to you?
Not really. I heard Dukes of Hazzard, but that's about it.
I'll send you a YouTube video and
Awesome.
Jeff, anything you want to know other than part 2 coming?
I would say here, you might ask yourself, you know, Teams optimization, is it ever really going to be a thing?
Yeah.
Come to part 2 and find out.
Specifically for WVD, or are you talking about for the industry as a whole?
For WVD.
Okay, great. Chris Feedy, anything else we want to leave on our listeners before you drop off?
Just to add on to what Jeff said, that is the #1 most requested thing for WVD. So as Jeff said, you probably want to tune into the next version to see what we've got to tell you about that.
Yeah. I think that's a great example where Microsoft kind of gets the, I don't know, Moore's Law effect or whatever, where they get to learn what people need today versus Citrix and others having to build it from the ground up over the past 30 years. Between money and the fact that this world's kind of come to us a little bit, they're going to be able to accelerate their growth and learning their evolution curve. Well, guys, with that, I appreciate the time. And just as soon as part 2 shows up on the IGEL blog site, I'm going to get it out there and ask you guys to join me again.
Thank you, Andy, for having us.
All right, guys. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Take care.
All right, Andy. Bye.